So I think this midweek satsang has been necessary because of the speed of the acceleration of events in the unreal world that many mistake for reality. And so I think part of our job is to give the spiritual perspective on the news of the day, as well as the ever news of the eternity of the self, and put them both into perspective. And of course, because the supreme intelligence is nothing if not utterly paradoxical, we are in a state in the illusory phenomenal plane of total paradox. Do we have a pen? So the world is clearly in a state of chaos, and yet that chaos is actually divine order. And what's important is to be able to perceive the divine presence within the apparent madness of a world that is unfolding psychopathically and psychotically at almost every level, perhaps at every level of reality, hopefully not including your own soul, but if you still have an ego, it probably does include that. And so it's useful to be able to, in a sense, create a capillary. You know, capillaries are where the veins and the arteries meet, and the nutrients are able to enter into the system, the oxygen, etc., and the waste carried out. So I think we need a new spiritual political system that we could perhaps call capillarism instead of capitalism. Because we need to have this capillary between the transcendent and the immanent, so that there is a refreshment of inner peace at the as the extreme of turmoil and destructiveness seem to rage externally. And then to be able to emanate that into the external plane. So, for example, in the US, we have a peace president who is, I think, going for the world record of starting more wars simultaneously than has ever been done. Not only is there apparently an imminent war scheduled between the U.S., Israel versus Iran, and who knows who else on their side, but Trump has been igniting wars of every kind, whether trade wars or hot wars or personal wars with friends and colleagues, and political wars apparently with politicians from other parties. And now, of course, we have a budding civil war in the U.S. So, you know, he couldn't, come up with too many more, but I'm sure that will happen as the days go by. And so the OK Corral is filled now with people shooting in all directions. And I think in this context, it's even more important to return to the roots of of what the human spirit is really all about. But to recognize that when an empire dies, in its death throes, it begins flailing wildly and insanely. And that happens to many individuals as well, as their health declines, their mental capacities decline, and dementia sets in, and regression, and tendencies for infantile acting out and erupting of tantrums, etc. So we see this happening at every level of the phenomenal plane. And at the same time, of course, and not coincidentally, we see the economy sinking very fast, the economy of the whole West, which is now threatening to destabilize the world's global economic and financial system. And as that happens, the extreme desperation for diversion through war becomes even more urgent for those who are trying to hold on to some shred of power. And so the spiritual response to all this has to be the opposite of that. An equal and opposite response to that chaotic acting out. But when an economy collapses, as is happening to the dollar economy, as well as the euro economy and that of other countries as well, people who had some resources and find that the value of their money is going down rapidly and the threat of hyperinflation increases, they begin to look very desperately for a store of value. And once the U.S. Treasury bonds no longer represent a safe store of value, then they begin to either try to hoard gold, which will probably not be very useful on a day-to-day basis, that you may need to trade for a loaf of bread or something else of immediate need, medicine, etc. Or you buy objets d'art, art objects that seem to have a high level of value on the art market. But of course, as the economy goes down, things like art that are not really necessities also begin to lose their interest. And you can go down the list of everything that economists would have, under normal conditions, considered to be a store of value. And we are reaching a point where really there is nothing in the external plane that is a secure store of value, which then I think begins to open the minds of people to the question of, well, what is value anyway? What value do I really need to have access to in a time like this, which is verging on total war and total social collapse and destruction that will no doubt contagiously spread from the empire to all the vassal states and the periphery in each continent? And what is actually essential to one's well-being. And I think that if one is really honest with oneself, there is nothing more important than to have a state of inner peace, to have a state of fearless tranquility in the face of the uncertainty of the continuity of life itself. And because life itself is not a store of value, since biological life has a very short expiration date, no matter what, the value would have to be in that level of consciousness that transcends the existence of the bodily form. And so ultimately, if we are theistically inclined, we would say the only store of value is God. If you're a Buddhist, you might say it's the Buddha nature, the Buddha mind, that's the essence of value, or it's Christ consciousness, or it's Brahman, or it's the Atman. It doesn't matter what word you use, because the value is not in the signifier. The value is only in that which is real, which language cannot reach, and which cannot be taken away or lost or defiled. And so a Sat Yogi is one who stores up that value. Who chooses the value of tranquility. But to really have that value in a true sense that is unlosable, unshakable, that is certain beyond doubt and beyond any possible conditions that could vitiate that state of tranquility, requires one shift of one's paradigm of consciousness. And that shift is the renunciation of personal identity. Because consciousness, in its eternal essence, is prior to the existence of the person you think you are, and will abide after the death and annihilation of any trace of the existence of the person you think you are. But if you are still identifying with that person and holding on to that as your store of value, you cannot receive, retain, and magnify the real value of unshakable tranquility. And it's this choice that has to be made that requires this one renunciation of everything that one had been holding on to and recognizing it as the obstacle to tranquility. The will to drop the ego, the will to be still, the will to keep the consciousness empty of the anxious thoughts of the personal character that cannot be stopped unless the character has been renounced as a representation of oneself, unless it's recognized as fictional and of no value whatsoever in comparison to the tranquility of the real self. Unless that is fully, totally recognized, one will not be able to perform the one act of letting go that is required for attaining peace. And so that is the wager that the Sat Yogi makes of the willingness to let go, and it's a very rare achievement. But when one does let go of that identification, one enters a very uncanny state. And it's a state in which suddenly there are no boundaries, because your mind had been bounded by the body form and the mental operating system with its limited perspectives, projections, and preconceptions. And once all of that has fallen away, there is an infinite, not only an infinite space, an infinite light, an infinite power, but an infinite amount of intelligence and wisdom that one's consciousness is merged with without differentiation. And it's only then that one realizes that there was no loss in that dropping away of the person for the supra-personal self, but an infinite gain. So, because we have been living in an atheistic, materialistic, consumeristic culture that valorizes only the ego of the individual and indoctrinates you into the belief that that is all you are, it is exponentially more difficult now to let go of the ego identity than it had ever been in the past. And yet, paradoxically, it's more urgent to do it now than ever in the past.